So we'll jump into our last half and do some current events. And one of the things that I think we need to be paying attention to is what the EU just passed, I think today or yesterday or the day before, and it has huge implications for all businesses in the United States, and has obviously prophetic implications. And you may not have heard this, but the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, triple Ds, passed. And you're like, what in the world is this? Well, it's them pushing the ESG basically as a law on all businesses, and on all businesses that have to deal with European businesses. And this has huge ramifications for any company in the United States that is doing business with Europe, basically. Of course, China, those other countries are exempt because China never does anything ESG, right? But this whole ESG thing, I'm sure you're aware of it. The environmental save the planet, the societal the social is the social justice stuff, and the governance means that you got to have diversity, equity, inclusion on your board, all kinds of junk. So what ended up happening is they made it law in the European Union. So what we have here is they have passed this ESG law that basically says that they will steer business towards ESG behavior and will become new global standard with regard to mandatory save the planet laws, social justice and all that. So they're implementing this. Now, to understand a few things about this, it establishes a corporate due diligence. That's the key word in all of this, standard on sustainability. And due diligence means that if I'm a company, I must do my due diligence to find out if everyone that's feeding into my company is doing ESG. I have to have my due diligence on that. So for instance, like if I sell cars to Europe and say I'm Toyota or something like that, okay? So I'm Toyota and I sell to Europe. I have to make sure that I, as Toyota, practice ESG, but then everybody that makes parts for me. So like this company over here makes the engine, this company over here makes the little dials on the radio, this company over here makes the tires. All of those people that feed into my business have to also be ESG compliant, otherwise I can't do business with them. Okay? So that even goes down, and I'll show a clip from Glenn Beck, it even goes down to Amazon. So like if you're selling on Amazon, which a lot of people do, that means Amazon has to be, if they're selling into Europe, has to be ESG compliant, and therefore anyone that's selling on Amazon has to be ESG compliant. So it has huge ramifications, and it's not a good thing. So this is right off the European Commission's website that I pulled up. Which companies will the new EU rules apply? Well, they start off with saying, 1,000 employees that you have, and they call it, you have to 450 million turnover. Turnover is like revenue, right? Okay, net. So if you're making that kind of, and you have over 1,000 employees, well, it's going to affect you. And you think, well, what am I? I'm a small business. Yeah, but if that small business is feeding into one of these companies, you're cooked because you have to comply too. And then large non-EU companies, over 900, if you have 450 million turnover, then you got to do it as well. So this is on their website. They've been trying to pass it, and they finally got it through. So as like Glenn Beck talked about it, he said, our society, through corporate decision-making and business partnerships, are going to be forced to conform with the European rules, values, and the environmental standards because the law will affect American companies as well. Social justice metrics have to be officially be imposed on America. The rule is directly pointed at companies that sell $500 million worth of product, and any company that does business with those companies will have to comply with the new rules. So this is not good. So let me play back for a while. It's about 5 minutes But listen to what he has to say about this. He took it pretty seriously, and I think he's on to something.
Now it's official and it's in writing, and so I'm going to explain it and tell you what it is and what it's going to do. It looked like this bill was going to die several times over the past few months. Now it is one of the biggest threats to freedom in America, both in the short and the long term, because of this law in Europe, our society, through corporate decision-making and business partnerships, are going to be forced to conform with the European rules, values, and environmental standards. European social justice metrics are now officially, they have to be imposed on America through this law. Here's what's going to happen. The EU has established an extraordinarily complex, very large ESG system that covers all companies. And when I say all companies will need to comply with. This includes both covered companies based in the U.S. as well as non-EU companies, such as those in America and Canada that operate in the EU. So in other words, you sell, I think it's $500 million worth of stuff, and you have to comply. You sell $500 million in Europe, just under that, then you have to comply. But so do all of the companies that you do business with. So if you're a small company and you're making widgets and you sell them to a company that is making big money, and I wonder if this applies to Amazon. You sell something on Amazon, that's a company that's making at least $500 million in Europe. You're going to have to comply. The covered companies will be required to submit reports to the European government authorities if they are EU-based customers or companies with more than 1,000 employees and a worldwide turnover of more than $489 million. Turnover is another word for revenue or income, but why wouldn't you say that? This word bothers me. I just think it's one of those. It's like stakeholders that nobody notices, and then you hear stakeholders and you know what it means. You're like, oh, that's everybody. Non-EU based companies, such as U.S. companies now, fall under the requirements if they have a net turnover of more than $489 million with the European Union. Franchise and licensing agreements, as well as subsidiaries of larger companies, will also fall under the EU's ESG regime. I don't know exactly. The lawyers have not even really explained this yet, but we have been covering this for so long. We think we know what this means, but licensing agreements, I write books. Some of them sell in Europe. Simon & Schuster sells books like crazy over in Europe. They're making over $489 million, I'm sure, in Europe. Am I now forced to comply? Thank God I have Mercury Inc. now, and I don't have to do Simon & Schuster. But am I required? Most importantly, all covered companies will need to ensure that the businesses in their supply and value chains, I don't know what that means. Do you know what supply and value chain is? Stu, you're the head of Ford. Have you checked your value change? What is exactly the numbers on your value change? Anybody who makes a widget for these companies has to adhere to the relevant ESG rules. Remember, ESG is environmental, social, and governance. So, do you have enough, gay, black, hermaphrodites that only have one leg? Do you have them on your board? Well, why not? That's your governance part. Social is all of the social justice that we've been fighting. And E, of course, is environment. This bill, by the way, will destroy the petroleum industry. And don't worry, petroleum is not used in anything. Nothing in petroleum. This will indirectly impose Europe's ESG standards on countless American companies, including many small businesses. All covered companies will need to create climate change transition plans, prevention action plans, establish contractual assurances from a direct business partner that it will ensure compliance with the business's prevention action plan. So you make a widget, but you don't sell it to Ford. You sell it to somebody that is making radios for Ford. You don't have anything to do with Ford. But if you want to sell a widget to another company that does business with Ford, or sell it to another company that company sells to another company to sell to Ford, you see how this is working? And if you don't comply in America, you cannot sell anything in Europe. Individual countries will write their own laws in accordance with this new EU ESG law. Each country in the EU will be responsible for enforcing its rules and issuing punishments. Civilian and activist groups also are covered in this bill. Activist groups can bring private cause of action against companies for failing to meet guidelines. Well, open up the floodgates for attorneys right there. The EU requirements are going to be phased in beginning in 2027.
Let's talk about the few things he said. Civilian and activist groups can bring private cause of action against companies who don't meet guidelines. So if you're a company, then some civilian or activist groups can actually sue you for not being ESG compliant. Now, again, if you're not a Christian and you're some CEO of a company, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to go along with this. You're going to go along with this, okay? Now, like he says, like when they transition to this ESG compliant, the businesses are going to bear the cost. This is coming from the EU Commission. The cost of establishing and operating the due diligence process will go to the businesses. Transition costs, including expenditures and investments to adapt the company's own operations and value chains to comply with due diligence obligation if needed. So basically, we're going to make the companies pay for this. Now, again, you just went through several years ago when all the companies, the small, medium companies, were basically put out of business, right? Because they can't stay at the level of the corporations, of the Home Depots and the Lowe's and the McDonald's and stuff like that. So the mom and pops are put out of business. The only way you're going to be able to comply is if you have a boatload of money to be able to transition your business to be ESG compliant. And who has that? Well, the only ones that have that kind of money are the large corporations. So basically what they're doing is, look, we're going to put you out of business. If you can't comply, you're out of business. And I'm sorry, you don't have the money to be ESG compliant. I'm sorry, we can't do business with you. And now you're out of business. And what it's moving into is more monopoly corporations and public-private partnership. Okay. How will the rules be enforced? Well, you have administration supervision. Member states will designate an authority to supervise and enforce the rules, including through injunctive orders and effective, proportionate, and dissuasive penalties, basically fines. At the European level, the Commission will set up a European network supervisor authority that will bring together representatives of national bodies to ensure a coordinated approach. So they're going to create some type of arm for this to supervise companies. This is coming from the European Commission. Civil liability. Member states will ensure that victims get compensated for damages. What victims? Resulting from intentional or negligent failure to carry out due diligence. What is the due diligence? That I'm doing ESG. So if I do not, like he said, put the one-legged hermaphrodite on my board, okay, then that one-legged hermaphrodite can sue me because I'm not ESG compliant. That's what they're saying. So I can be sued civilly for this, or whatever, or I'm not doing measures to save the planet in my business or something like that. Okay, So Glenn goes on and talks about it a little bit more. So go ahead and listen to him. It's about 5 more minutes, okay?
Now, let me get into the actual requirements that we can, this is a very complex and very big bill. There's not a single long list of specific rules that companies need to comply with. There are some specific rules that are included. However, this new law includes hundreds of vague statements and references to existing international agreements and EU regulations. Many of those are also long agreements featuring many more rules, such as the Paris Climate Agreement and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. You know that. You're complying, I'm sure. Oh, you're not? I guess we should read up on it. As a result of the complexity and expansiveness of the rules, the total number of social credit scoring metrics, let me say that again, the total number of social credit scoring metrics included in this law is currently unknown, but is likely in the hundreds, if not more than 1,000. It's hard to tell currently. You get social credit scores. Now, let me ask you something. Is the EU actually going to stop buying everything that comes from China? Because there's no way China will comply with this. Do you know what that will do to the prices to the European Union if they stop buying things from China? And if we don't stop this, if we stop buying things from China, prices, you will go broke quickly. Businesses will go out of business quickly. Now, here's just one example of the law where it's not economic, it's actually on climate change and free speech. The directive is an important legislative tool to ensure corporate transition to a sustainable economy. What they're saying there is no longer a capitalist system, including to reduce the existential harms and costs of climate change, to ensure alignment with the global net zero by 2050, and to avoid any misleading claims regarding such alignment, and stop greenwashing, disinformation, and fossil fuel expansion worldwide in order to achieve international and European climate objectives. So notice they throw in misinformation. One law firm notes, companies are required to effectively engage with stakeholders. Let me say that again. Companies are required to effectively engage with stakeholders. Do you remember who the stakeholders are? Because they're not you. The stakeholders are the governments, the social activists, and I think that's it, and the companies themselves. Those three get together because, you know, the Sierra Club is a stakeholder in making sure that our trees are okay and our environment is clean. The government is just a representative of you. Yeah. I stopped believing that a long time ago. So you don't have a voice. Your voice is the Senate, the House, and the president. That's the stakeholder that they have to deal with. Companies have to sit down when they're making these rules with those guys. This includes carrying out consultations at various stages of the due diligence process. That's going to be cheap. During which companies must provide comprehensive information. Now, according to the European Parliament, member states will be required to provide companies with detailed online information of their due diligence obligations via practical portals containing the Commission's guidance. They will also create or design and designate a supervisory authority to investigate and impose penalties on any non-compliant firms. These will include naming and shaming. That's a quote. This will include, in quotes, naming and shaming and fines of up to 5% of the company's net worldwide turnover. Again, worldwide turnover. Why not use revenue? Additionally, a breach of certain CSDDD obligations, that's the catchy acronym for it, may result in civil liability for damages. However, a company cannot be held liable for any damage caused by its business partners in its chain of activities. I can guarantee you we are at least a year, maybe 2 years ahead of everyone else. They are not paying attention to this. Do not dismiss this when you go in to vote.
So, just a couple things that he said. The scoring metrics, he said what they're reading on the European Commission is probably over 1,000 scoring metrics on that, okay? That's, again, social credit score. Like we said, they can bring private cause that can sue. It's in accord to the Paris Climate Agreement. Remember, Trump got us out of that. Biden put us right back into it, right? And then it's according to the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as he mentioned. Now, when I looked this up on the United Nations website, and again, anyone can go look this up all you want, and they tell you what they want. So basically, when you look at this, this was established like, I think in the 40s, right? 45, 44, or something like that. And what it really is the creation of positive rights. As I looked through it, it was like, well, we're going to provide education, we're going to provide housing, all these positive rights that you hear them talk about, that none of that comes from the Bible, by the way. Positive rights come from the government. We don't believe our rights come from the government, because governments, in order to give positive rights, you have to understand this. When a government says, I believe that we should erase college debt, okay, Biden wants to erase college debt, even though the Supreme Court said you're not going to do that. That's a right for these kids. In order to give a positive right from the government, you have to take away other people's rights. That's the only way you can give a positive right. So when you look at inalienable rights that come from like the Ten Commandments, they're in the negative because they already belong to you. So the only thing that you can do is lose them by somebody tries to take them from you. But there's no, government gives positive rights. Well, that's what the UN does. It's saying we should have this, we should have that, and the question is, well, who's going to pay for it? Because it's certainly not going to be you. Oh, that's right, it's taxpayers. Okay, so a couple of things on there, and I'm going to bring this to a spiritual connection here. You have to do due diligence obligations. You have to submit reports to the EU. Net zero by 2050 has to be all through your business. Sustainable economy, which means the destruction of capitalistic society. Basically, as Klaus Schwab talks about it, a stakeholder economy. And really what it is a public-private partnership. It's fascism. It's a global fascism. Curb disinformation and misinformation regarding climate change, fossil fuels, basically the destruction of free speech. You do not want anyone having free speech. So these rights, apparently these positive rights, don't give free speech. They take away free speech. Anyway, and then as an example, they have a methodology called a degrowth methodology. And again, communists have this, but again, this is kind of their mentality. And what it means is this. They want to degrowth, obviously, the economy and their mentality is economic output increases carbon emissions. So the better the economics are of a country, the more carbon emissions come out, okay? This is stupid logic, okay? This is just the stupidity of these people, okay? So they say there's a correlation between that, okay? So for them, the best way to fight a climate change is for wealthy nations to cut back on their consumption and reduce their material throughput, okay? That creates demand for energy and drives GDP. So the degrowth movement has swelled in recent years, particularly in Europe and in academic circles. These idiots at these Ivy League places talk about this. And obviously the theory has dramatic implications. Like I said last week, what do they want? Well, if I can't kill the population and economic output is correlated to carbon emissions, then we have to reduce our economic output to reduce our carbon emissions, and that means we need to make everyone poor. Okay? We need to make everyone poor. So that's how we're going to reduce carbon emissions. Again, I showed you that last week, and here we are again. It's a degrowth movement. So instead of finding carbon neutral ways to power our luxurious modern lifestyles, they say, degrowth would require us to surrender material comforts. So one of the leading proponents suggests imposing a hard cap on total national energy use, which would ratchet down every year. Well, what do you mean? Energy-intensive activities might be banned outright or taxed to a near oblivion. For instance, say goodbye to perhaps to hamburgers, SUVs. They wouldn't sell them anymore. Your annual cross-country flight home for your holidays, they're not going to let you do that type of thing. Prohibited from setting your thermostat too cold in the summer, too hot in the winter. To keep frivolous spending down, the government might decide which products are wasteful and ban advertising for them. Slower growth would require less labor. So guess what? So the government would shorten the work week and guarantee a job for every person. That's what we're talking about. Okay? That's called the degrowth movement. That's what's involved in this. That's why Glenn Beck is freaking out about it and did a whole 18-minute episode on it because of the implications of the Europeans doing this, which we know our Senate and our White House would go right along with this. They have no problem doing that, okay? So again, what gets created? A supervisor authority to investigate and enforce penalties for non-compliant companies. Like Glenn Beck said, the naming and shaming, it's right there. It's quote, unquote. They will name and then they will shame. That's what they said, okay? And think about this. A 5% fine on company revenues. Let's say I make 400, or let's $500 million. They're going to take 5% of $500 million if I'm not ESG compliant. 5%? You see the money-making scheme here? Oh my goodness, 5% of fines? Multi-million-dollar corporations? Yeah. Now let's bring it together. Understand it from a biblical standpoint. So here's the context. Here's what's happening. But then what you have to do is marry it to what the whore of Babylon and really the Babylonian system is trying to achieve. Revelation 17 says this, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." So the harlot, obviously, is the whore of Babylon, and she's where all false religion comes from, okay? Make no mistake, what the EU is doing, what the Europeans are doing, what the EU, the UN, all these groups, the World Economic Forum, is pushing another religion. ESG is another religion. It's not a political aspect. It has a political component to it, but it's a religious aspect, okay? And so the harlot, what you want to think about in the harlot's term, she's the provocateur of false religion. She's a harlot in the fact that she perverts religion, okay? So what do you mean? Well, religion, true religion, according to James, is that which serves others. That's true religion. You serve God by serving others. That's the way true religion. So he says, serve orphans and widows. You serve the least of your congregation, your community, whatever. So you serve God by serving others. That's the proper thing. The whore takes religion and perverts it and then makes the religion, instead of serving others, people serve the religion, if that makes sense. It inverts it, okay? That's what the whore does. She inverts it. That's why she's called a harlot, because she inverts it and perverts what true religion is supposed to do. So one of the things about religion you have to understand is true religion based on faith in God, if it will unify a diverse population, if that diverse population believes in the core tenets of what the Bible states, okay? So you can come from any background, nationality, whatever, and if you believe in these core tenets of the Bible, you will be unified around that truth. And that's the brilliance of the church is made up of every tribe, language, tongue, and nation can be unified under a common set of principles, okay? Believe it or not, that's where the melting pot concept for the United States comes from, right? That we all come from different backgrounds, and we go into the melting pot, and the melting pot is, these are the American values we hold. It doesn't matter where you come from. So we come and we hold that, and that brings unity. So the great thing about religion, true religion, based on the foundational principles of the Bible, is it does unify. It does unify, okay? But what Satan does, what the whore of Babylon does, is it destroys that true unity that's based on truth and creates tribalism, okay? So now we have what the whore is pushing is diversity, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. It's one of the things, okay? Please understand. What do they sell? They say we celebrate diversity. Strength and diversity. Have you heard those terms? Those are Marxist terms. There is no strength and diversity unless you are unified around the truth. That's how diversity works. It has to have truth. But if diversity is just for the sake of diversity, guess what happens? Division, tribalism, identity politics, whatever you want to call it. Everyone goes their separate way because the diversity is not centered around a unifying principle of truth. Okay, so what's happened in America is the whore has been working, okay? So she has sent diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG scores into the United States, and that has caused tribalism in the United States, which is breaking up our national unity surrounding a certain set of principles, particularly in the church of truth. Like males don't have babies, okay? That's a truth. Males don't have babies. So now that's on its head now because of diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG, save the planet, all that junk, okay? So what they're doing is destroying real true unity, replacing it with tribalism, and then once you have the tribalism and you have no unifying factor, then you usher in the false religion that brings a unifying factor, but it's a counterfeit unifying factor because you've gotten rid of the truth. So you've brought in lies for people to unify around, okay? That's what the whore does in all false religions. But now she's doing it on a global scale. It's now her time, okay? So with the formation of a new unity, that's what you're seeing the companies do, is create a new unifying principle, ESG, diversity, equity, inclusion, all that junk. It's all religious practices, and unifying the whole world in this new supra-religion, which is the whore, okay? Notice what she does. With whom the kings of the earth, who are the kings? The leaders of countries committed fornication. What does that mean? It means that they're doing a deal with her religiously, that they're selling themselves out for what the whore can give them. And it's using that in a sexual term of saying, look, they're doing a deal with her to promote her, and then she gives something back to them, right? So they're using her, she uses them for what she can get. Okay, and also the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Again, the wine of her fornication is her false religion and unifying principle. So it makes people drunk in the fact that they don't think straight. For example, if you believe a man can have a baby, you're intoxicated by the wine of her fornication. She makes you believe things that are not true, like the planet's dying and humans are a cancer, all that stuff. You start believing things that are not true. right? That's the whole point behind this. Okay, so what she is establishing is she can't exist on her own. She has to have a help that comes from not only the government, but from the merchants of the earth. You have the kings of the earth, and you have the merchants of the earth. So she has to have help in her position. And what we have now going on here is a public-private partnership that's going on. Like Glenn Beck was saying, the stakeholders in this are the government, the corporations, and, the Sierra Club, so to speak, these crazy wackadoo organizations. So what the strategy is what the government cannot do legally, the corporations can do through the back door by pushing the ESG. Okay? So notice what Revelation 18:3 says. For all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So the idea is that this is a global problem that everyone will do. Okay? It's not a regional thing. But notice who's involved. The kings of the earth, again, that's the politicians, that's the governments of the world, had committed fornication with her. And who else? The merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. So there's your private public partnership pushing a religion right in front of you. The governments and the merchants are working together, which is exactly what they're doing right now. That's what they're doing. And they're pushing a false religion. They're pushing her. Okay? So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And so this is a projection into the future, into the tribulation period. So this is telling you where the end game goes. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy and having 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, that's real simple to understand in the sense that is the beast government that will be in effect during the tribulation. And the beast government is a global government, right? And eventually will be ran by the Antichrist. But in the process, before the Antichrist takes the global government, it is ran by 10 kings, 10 global regional kings who oversee the entire planet, okay? But notice where she's at on them. She's sitting on them. What that means is that the civil government is actually supporting her. They are promoting her throughout the world. Along with the merchants, the governments are doing this. So this is a mystery that got revealed. So Revelation 17 says this, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. So she's getting very rich off of this, by the way, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and of the filthiness of her fornication. Why? Because everything she pushes in her religion is antithetical to the Bible. The Bible says there are male and females, it says there's 52, right? It's everything is totally opposite of what God said. God created the heavens and the earth. It says, no, you were here through evolution, or aliens put you here, or something like that. Everything is like the opposite, right? So that's the filthiness of her fornication. And the problem is she gets rich off of this. Again, I've showed you some of the aspects of it. The fines, if you don't comply with the whore, are like 5%. Again, you're making $500,000, I mean not $500,000, but $500 million as a company, and you have to give 5% because you're not compliant. You can see how the whore would become very wealthy, right? She gets really rich off of this. So whoever's controlling her is getting the money for this, okay? And it says this, mystery. Now, when you see the word mystery, it means that this is something that was not revealed in the Old Testament, but is now being revealed in the New Testament. So this is the second satanic mystery. And the mystery is Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. And we think, well, that's not a mystery. You're right. That's not the mystery aspect of her. We already know she's the harlot. We already know she's the mother. She's the abominations. We already know that all the false religions come from the whore. That's the Old Testament. What was the mystery? The mystery is that she rides on the beast. That was the mystery that no one knew in the Old Testament. They knew the whore, but they didn't realize that the civil government would actually support her and push her agenda. Now, why? Well, first of all, you have to understand the nature of religion. You have to have a unifying factor. Even if the unifying factor is not true, you still have to have a unifying factor. So Constantine, like I showed you with the church of Pergamum, what did he do to unify the Roman Empire? He made Christianity the official religion of the empire. And he used Christianity as a tool to unify. Even though he didn't show any really good signs of him being really a believer or not, he did understand the purpose of religion. So most people who are smart and want to control people realize you can't just come at people with a totally secular mentality. People won't buy it. You have to come with people with a form of religion, but that denies the power therein. So you have to unify people with religion, even though it's false. And that's what they're doing. This is a religion. And she's the mother of the harlots. Okay. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So he explains, she comes from the people. The people are promoting her as well. Everybody is promoting her. So it's a unifying factor, okay? And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. And you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. It totally makes sense. You understand, the people at the top know that what they're pushing is false. But everyone under them is a useful idiot and believes the false narrative, like the planet's dying because of humans. The ones at the top don't believe that. They don't believe any of that junk, okay? They're just using the false religion to get unity. You really think that the ones at the top think there's 52 genders? They're using the LGBT community. And once they're done with them, they will destroy them. You understand? That's how revolutions work. They use a bunch of useful idiots who actually believe in the junk, and then they kill them at the end. So notice what they do with the whore. Once they get into power and they don't need her anymore, once they have taken full control, they hate the harlot. They don't even like what they're pushing. They're using Islam, they're using the LGBT, they're using the transgender, they're using all that junk. They hate the harlot, and they will make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. They're going to destroy her once they get power. But in order to get the power, you have to have a unifying religion to unite everyone around. That's what they're doing. So they don't even believe this, okay? That's what he's trying to say. So now we have God involved in this. He's allowing this. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose. This is why this is going on. This is why the ESG, the DEI scores are happening. God is allowing this because we're living in the last days. To be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast, which that's the ultimate goal. So they have to get rid of her so they can give it to the Antichrist until the words of God are fulfilled. So everything you're seeing is according to plan. And the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So that's not a mystery. The great city is Babylon. Well, don't spiritualize this because that's a mistake. Don't spiritualize Babylon because Babylon, people say, well, it's New York City, it's London, it's this, it's that. No. To stay hermeneutically consistent, Babylon is always Babylon. So let me substantiate this for you. Revelation 14:8. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, the great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And I know what you're saying. If I look today on Google Earth and I go to where Babylon was, all you're going to see is the ruins there. That's all you're going to see in Iraq is ruins. And people are going to say that it's saying, look, the great city is there. It's in Iraq. It's destroyed there. And then if I bring in Zechariah 5, I substantiate it even more. Then the angel who talked with me came out and said to me, lift your eyes now and see what this is that goes forth. So I asked, what is it? And he said, it is a basket that is going forth. What kind of basket? Well, that's an ephah. You know what an ephah is? It's what you would do business with, and you trade spices and fruits and vegetables and different things like that. You used ephahs. And so this is a trading device which represents economy. Okay? That's what the ephah represents. It represents an economy. So it is an economy that is going forth. Okay? Where does it go? He also said, this is their resemblance throughout the earth. Here is a lead disc lifted up, and this is a woman sitting inside the basket. Then he said, this is wickedness. And he thrust her down into the basket and threw the lead cover over its mouth. Let's unpack that just a little bit. So we have an ephah, which represents an economy. Okay? But notice that it has a lead disc lifted up that will shove down the whore inside the economy. Are you following? The lead disc is a representation of cheating in weights and measures. Because in the ancient world, you would weigh out your coinage with, if you're buying wheat or if you're buying barley, if you're buying spice, or you would weigh things out in weights and measures. Well, the thing is, when you cheated, they would put lead discs on the one side, and you would cheat the other person through the lead discs. What he is saying is, look, this is the economy that they're creating. The lead disc is the top lid for it, which means they're cheating everyone. This is a major cheat of everybody. It's covering the entire top of the economy is cheating. But notice who's inside the economy. This is wickedness. This woman. Well, it's the same woman in Revelation 17 and 18. It's the whore. It's the harlot. That's who Zechariah is talking about. This is the harlot. But where is she? She's in the economy. She's inside of it. So the religious aspect of this Babylonian system is within the economy. That's how you see her. She's not a part of it, apart from it. She's in it, which is exactly what you're seeing right in front of you. But wait a second. Where is she going to be taken? Then I raised my eyes, and I looked, and there were two women. These are not angels, by the way. There are no female angels. This is a vision, okay? Coming with the wind in their wings. For they had wings like the wings of a stork, okay? So the idea of a stork, that's an unclean bird. The aspect of two women means that she's being taken, this economy, and her in the economy, and this unfair economy, with a lead disc, is being nurtured like women would nurture something, like a baby or something. So it's being nurtured. That's what the idea of the women involved. But the fact that it has stork wings represents that it's unclean. The whole thing is unclean. So whatever these two aspects are, they nurture her to a safe location. Wait a second. What's on the three-legged stool? The three-legged stool of Babylon is the kings of the earth, the merchants of the earth, and her. 1, 2. She's the third. She's being taken. So who's mothering her? It's the kings of the earth and the merchants of the earth that are mothering her, that are nurturing her, that are taking care of her. And the fact that they're in wings means that she's being swiftly taken somewhere. And they lifted up the basket between earth and heaven. Okay? So she will serve then as a mediator. That's the idea. When Christ was crucified, he was the mediator between heaven and earth, wasn't he? And he was lifted up. That meant that he was not touching the earth and he was not in heaven, but he was in between. He was lifted up between. He's the one mediator between God and man. But notice what they're doing. They're lifting her up between heaven and earth. She's a counterfeit to the mediation between God and man. They're using her in that regard, if you're seeing this. Okay? So I said to the angel who talked with me, "Where are you carrying the basket?" And he said to me, "To build a house for it in the land of Shinar. When it is ready, the basket will be set there on its base." Well, if I look at the ancient word for Shinar, and guess where that leads me? Right smack dab in the middle of Iraq. That's where it leads me. And Shinar is where Babylon was built. And what Zechariah the prophet is saying, what they're doing right now in the EU will not stay in the EU. It will not stay in the United States. Yes, it will be global, but the center of it will be taken to Iraq, and they're protected by the kings of the earth and the merchants of the earth, because that's where she's destroyed, and the kings of the earth and the merchants of the earth mourn for her once she is destroyed there in one day, Babylon, the great city. So what I'm telling you is it takes just an amount of faith to believe that one day Iraq, believe it or not, will be the center of all economic and commercial transactions, and that will be the headquarters of the Antichrist. How that happens, I don't know. But I'm just following Scripture. Now, again, you're going to have to take a lot on faith, because Babylon means Babylon, but you say, well, nothing's there. Well, that would be the same argument you would make to me before 1948 about Israel. You would say, well, if I came to you and I said, look, the prophets are predicting that Israel's going to be back in the land, and you're like, that's not going to happen. Look at the land's desolate. Mark Twain said it was totally desolate. There's not a tree standing anywhere. I saw very few inhabitants. So, Brandon, that's crazy. It's got to be a spiritual answer to that. But 1948 happened, and what was the answer? It was literal, wasn't it? It became a nation in one day, the nation of Israel. So, the same is true about Babylon. Even though there's nothing there yet, what the Bible says that the storks will take her there. The merchants and the kings of the earth will take her there, and she's, why? When it is ready, the basket will be set there on its base. So it will be created. There will be a base for her, like an idol, but a base in which she operates unencumbered, where she's protected in that area. Now, the question then becomes, why does she need to be protected in that area? Why does she need to be moved to Iraq? Why is she not protected in London? Why is she not protected in New York or China or wherever? Why does she have to be taken to the Middle East in Iraq and protected there? Why does the Antichrist build his headquarters there? I wonder. Because obviously she's moved there because they want to protect her. So that is what you must chew on. I'll give you back the presents. Terry's wanting the presents back. Terry's wanting the presents back. Yeah, so you'll have to wait till we resume back in August, because this is one you need to study. You need to understand why. Okay, so if you put it all together, what you learned, okay, you got ESG, you got DEI, all that junk, that's the whore. She's embedded in the economy. Why does she need to be taken out there? Again, think about the economy, what we've learned. The economy will be digital. The economy will need servers. The economy, will be ran, and it has to be protected from any enemy that would try to take the servers out. because if it's digital, it has to be on servers. You have to have a server farm. You have to have huge areas in which, if you're going to control the entire economy from one place, it has to be very protected, and you have to have a lot of space, and you have to have a lot of sunlight if you're going to run it off solar. So I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But if you're going to have a digital currency, you've got to have the technology. You've got to have the protection. And apparently, it's not protected in the United States. It's not protected in Europe. It's not protected anywhere on this planet other than in Iraq. But here's the interesting thing. There's a spiritual principle that we all need to take away from this. And we got to get out of here. The principle is this. Notice that Iraq, or Babylon, is being put back where it started. It started there, and after all these thousands of years, God is bringing it back where it started. Now, that's a principle you will think about even in your own life. When there's unfinished business in your life, and you haven't tied up all the loose ends, God will always bring you back to where it started. Every time. Every time. He will take you right back and say, now I need you to deal with it right here. Even though it's been 20, 30, 40 years, he will circle back, and you will always have to deal with the unfinished business. So same principle. And then he will destroy Babylon where it began, right there. So anyway, figure out in the next few months, why Iraq? Why Iraq? Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you, Lord, for what we can learn from not only the rewards aspect tonight, but also what you're doing in the world. We see the activities of what you're allowing. We see the whores activity. We see the merchants. We see the kings of the earth working now to form this global corporate fascism, this global government that is predicted. We see it. Help us to be watchers on the wall, to notify people, to let people know what's happening, so they don't fall prey to all of this, and they can get saved and be raptured before it goes really bad. So help us, Father, and help us have a blessed summer. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.